Hey guys, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how I do some hand painting of the textures that I'm going to then be applying in Blender. So this kind of follows on from a tutorial series I did on X-Wing, where I showed you how to model the X-Wing fighter from Star Wars, and then we went on to do some really basic texturing using Blender, and then I showed you how to UV unwrap and bring it into Photoshop, paint it, and then wrap it back. I didn't really cover much on the actual painting itself, and what I did was really crude and basic, you can see here, just to show you the basic principle. So what I'm going to do now is do a little bit more in depth as to how we actually do this in Photoshop and what process I use. Although I don't profess to be a graphic artist or Photoshop expert, it just gives you an idea as to kind of how the process works. So once I've exported my UVs, I open up in Photoshop as a PNG, and here it is, and this is basically what you will get. So the first thing I do is I create another layer, and I want to make sure those layers always stay on the bottom there, and then on this layer here what I can do is begin to paint. Now what you want to do first of all is get your base colors in. So you want to choose just a regular kind of brush. So I'm going to choose this brush here, and let's resize the brush a little bit. Now let's go first of all with our red stripe. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to my layer 1 here. This is my UV unwrap layer. I'm going to select my Magic Wand tool, and I want to select the red color here. So this is going to be our red stripe. Now switch layers back down to layer 1, and let's grab our brush, and then we're just painting here with the color that we want. So let's change that because we want red. Our opacity is going to be 100%. And we paint our red in, and you'll see it'll stay within those lines that we selected. And then if I go to my selection and we inverse this, so we'll inverse our selection, and then I'm going to change my brush color to be a slight off-white. That's going to be the color of the rest of our spaceship, the rest of our X-Wing. So we're going to go around, and you want to try and stay within the lines. It's a bit like when you're a kid and you're coloring in a book. Doesn't matter if you go a little bit out. Actually, a little bit out is better than not enough, so you can overlap, because the bits which overlap anyway will not be seen in our final texture when it's applied in Blender. So it doesn't matter if we go over the lines a tad. So let's color all of this in. I'm using a graphics tablet, by the way, an Intuos 5 Pro. It just makes this coloring in process a little bit easier and more natural. But you don't have to have a graphics tablet. You can also just use a mouse or your touchpad. Okay, so there's our base color. So I'm going to actually change this to our base color. Okay, so this is going to be our base color layer. And then we want to start adding in then some defects. If we look at an example here of an X-Wing, you can see here that in this particular image, you can see there's a lot of these kind of scratches and dirt marks and whatnot around the panels, etc. And this is the kind of stuff that we want to paint in Photoshop. So when we wrap this back up, it's going to have a more realistic look to it. So we're going to want to use some brushes which give us these kind of splattered effects. So you can actually find those. I use this website qbrushes.net, and in there you can find all different types of brushes that will give you these splattered kinds of effects, and they're free to download. So once you've downloaded it, just select it and it will load it into Photoshop, and then it will become available under your preset brushes. You can see they start to become available here. So this one's got some text on it. You can get all these different types of brushes. Here's some splatter effect. Then you would resize that brush and place it wherever we want it to be. So I'm going to download a few more different types of brushes from QBrush that maybe we might want to use. So let's have a look. So we've got some splatters. Maybe we want also some let's have a look at these high-res mess here. Let's take a look at those so we get a full preview. Yes, I think we want these. These are good to go around our panels. You see how they have the square edges? That's the type of thing that we want for our panels. So I'm going to download those also. Let's have a look. What other things is it giving us here? So let's go for the grunge, and we'll have a look at that. The grunge brushes. It's going to load those brushes that we just got here, the high-res mesh there. So we'll just load that into Photoshop also. And let's have a look at these grunge brushes. What do we have there? yes, again, these types of things are what we want for our panels. So we'll download those as well. And once it's downloaded, we just load it up into Photoshop. So again, that's QBrushes.net that we're using here to get hold of these free brushes that we can then use in Photoshop. Okay, so now let's zoom in a little bit here. And we want a kind of dirty brown color for our splashes. So let's just zoom around a little bit. All right, now let's change our brush. Some of those new ones that we just got, let's have a look. That's our square corners there. Let's resize that. Let's go with that square corner brush, I think, for now. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go with this one. Right. Now, you can see it's a little bit large, so we will scale it down. And let's change our color. We no longer want this red, so we want to go for kind of a dirty brown color. So we'll select that. It's going to be quite dark. And then let's change our opacity. We don't want this to be completely opaque, so we'll knock our opacity down a little bit. Now you'll see if we come into here and we stamp this brush onto our base layer here, we should begin to get some coloration. Let's increase our opacity a little bit so it's more visible. Okay, close off our brushes here. Reason that brush is not showing up. Let's have a look. Sorry, need to switch our color. Let's get that brown color. Okay, and our opacity, shift down a little bit. Let's display that again. Alright, so let's place this here. There you go. So you see there we get our brownish colored marking. Let's go around and select where else maybe that we want that to be applied. Let's change the scale of our brush. We'll go a little bit bigger. And we'll also place that here. There. A few other places as well. Let's have a look where these panels would be on our spacecraft. So we'll switch into our we'll open up another one here, and we'll change this into our UV image mode. We open up our body here, scroll down a little bit, and we'll tap into edit mode. Alright, so let's see which parts these actually are. Hold on, the image, and we'll change this into solid. Okay, so this panel here that we've got selected is this panel here. The panel there is that corner. So you just begin to decide where you want these grunge marks to be. Now maybe we want some here. That's a different panel over there. Maybe on this corner here, which would be our upper right corner there, I guess. So let's come back over here into Photoshop. So that's going to be kind of this corner here. So I'm just gonna, it's a bit of a splatter mark in there. Doesn't matter if this overlaps there, like I say, because that's not going to be seen anyway once we do our wrapping. Maybe I also want a little bit here, coming into that corner. No, because it's squaring the wrong way. Okay, now once we have it on one side of the panel, we may also want it on the other. So we'll come back over to our brushes. So this panel is a right angle like that. We want one which is slightly different, kind of the opposite angle. Whoops. scale this down a little bit. Okay, so there's a longer, thinner one. Maybe we want to place that kind of around here. A little bit also here. And we'll go down here also. Let's scale up a little bit. Kind of like that. And let's have a look. What other brushes do we have here? Maybe some use because our brush presets. Here's the one we were just looking at. How about this one? Okay, stick this one up here. And we can also choose to rotate around these brushes. So rotate that around, so you can rotate it to match the corner that we want to apply it to. So let's begin to apply it to that corner there. Rotate this around also that way. Here also. And we'll place a little bit there. And we'll rotate it around. And some here. So it's just a matter really of just going around and applying this texturing and brushes and whatever to wherever we want. Just to start to really give it a more realistic look. This is how I go about it. You see, these brushes really actually make your life a lot easier. If you had to hand paint all of this, it would probably be possible if you're skilled enough with Photoshop. But for someone like me, I'm not really much of a graphic artist, it would not come out all that fantastic. So these brushes really do help me with applying in these textures. Now, we also need some texturing as well on the red part there. It's going to be a little bit of flaking of the paint. So let's inverse our selection again. So we'll go to select and inverse. And I'm going to change my color here to be kind of slightly off-white. And let's change our brush presets again. I'm going to go for a little bit of a splatter brush, maybe something like this. Change the scale of that, and don't like that. Edit, step backwards. It's a matter of playing around really with your brushes, and so this is kind of not very opaque. We're keeping the opacity low. And we can use the same brush and rotate it around so it doesn't look like we're kind of actually using the same brush. That will just begin to give some worn effect there. Now I'm going to increase my opacity slightly, and I'm going to change the color of the brush to our brown one. And let's change our brush type. Let's go for a different splatter. Smaller, and I want to splatter that kind of just around this area here. A little bit around here as well. Let's increase the opacity so it's a bit more visible. Yeah, I'm just going to just put some of that in there just to give it a weathered and worn kind of look. Particularly around the ends there. And change my brush type again. Let's go for a different splatter. It's a little bit too much. Let's scale this down. I'm going to put this around these, particularly around where we have seams and joins in our metalwork. That's particularly where we want to have these darker areas. Okay, so you can see now, actually, if I zoom out, we're starting to get kind of quite a good effect there, but it's a little bit too clean in the middle for my liking. We need to do something about that. So what we will do is we'll take one of our kind of grungy splatter brushes. Let's have a look what we have. Maybe this one. No, I'm so happy with that. Something like this, and we make it a little bit larger, and we'll see what happens if we just kind of apply that there. It's a little bit too much. We also want to invert my selection again, so I'm going to go to select and inverse, and let's knock down our opacity so it's very low, and we'll stick that on there. Still, that's a little bit too much. The splodges are a little bit too large, so I don't quite like that. Let's change our brush. Let's go for maybe this one. We'll scale it up. How's that? That's a little bit better. I think it gives us yeah, a little bit more of a random effect. I'm still not too happy with that. Under the brush tool. Let's knock the opacity down even more. That's a little bit better. Okay. Still, I think we could go lower on the opacity. So I'm just going to undo that. Let's go lower still. Maybe 12%. Okay. That gives us a little bit of a mottling effect to the paint there. Okay. Again, I'm going to keep this very, very low opacity, and I'm going to place this in here. Let's go a little bit higher in the opacity. And I'm going to make the color a little bit lighter brown. Now, let's rotate the brush. There we go. Okay. So you get the idea. We just basically use these, after putting the base color on, we use these brushes to begin going around and adding in a little bit of this grungy used effect. And that will, when it's wrapped up onto our final image, really help to sell the effect that this is an actual spacecraft that has been flying through space, picking up dirt and debris along the way. Okay, so if you want to check at any time how it's kind of looking and turning out, what we'll do is we just go to File, and we'll go to Save As. We'll save that as a bodypaint.png. Save that. Replace. Okay. Now we'll come over into Blender, and we'll open up our bodypaint.png. We'll reload the image, and there's our reloaded image there. So you can see how it's starting to look when we come over to here. Let's display all our layers again, so we have our lighting. Tab out of edit mode. Yep, we've got all our layers being displayed. We'll come up into rendered. And there you go, that gives you a preview now of how our painting is turning out when it's been UV unwrapped and then mapped back onto our image. So you can see there now how those grunge brushes are adding in this dirt effect around the seams of our metal work on our spacecraft body. And it really is starting now to give it a more believable spacecraft, dirty, grungy Star Wars effect. So I'm going to continue in the same way in Photoshop, basically doing the whole thing, and then we'll wrap it all up after, and we'll see the final finished output. So after a little bit of work here in Photoshop, you can see I've done now the side and the top part here. Now sometimes, you know, the textures look a bit odd when they're flat like this, and we've got these overlaps, but that doesn't actually matter, because when it's wrapped, all of this excess stuff here will be trimmed away anyway. So we come over here now into Blender, and you can see that here's my unwrapped image there, and then you can see in the preview where it has been already wrapped around our model. So you can see how it's starting to, you know, really add to the realism. So when we do our final render, it's going to look much better. I haven't done the wings or anything yet, but you can see that this is basically the process of how we go about painting our model using these using Photoshop and the grungy type brushes, and really we just follow the metal panel seams, and we put some rust around the joints and whatnot. So if I were to render out one of these scenes now, we can get an idea of how it looks. The output with all of the compositing that we also did in the previous tutorials added. As you can see, maybe we've gone a little bit overboard, maybe on the rusting and the dirtiness here. So you may want to tone that down a little bit. It's just a matter of playing around in Photoshop till you get the look that you want. And really, you know, we need to paint all of the other parts as well to get the final finish effect. But you get the idea now as to how the UV unwrapping works, and how in Photoshop you can begin to paint and texture our finished model so it has a more realistic look to it. So I hope that you found this useful, and thanks for tuning in. Hit the like button, and I'll see you next time.